we're here. This is our main kind of production studio for this facility. We have a fully digital production facility down at COSI that we use more than we use here. A lot of the things that we do out of here we lease to other entities on campus or around campus. And Paul Peliquin, who is standing in the corner back here, he's our studio guru.
Okay. Well, as Kevin said, we have a state-of-the-art digital facility down at COSI, and this facility here, believe it or not, those two little cameras on top of the tripods there that look like white gumball machines are actually broadcast quality HD cameras. And electronics have gotten to the point where they've gotten so small now that actually a lot of stations are using robot cameras, which is what they are, to produce television programming. In fact, there are stations in Columbus using robots. We do a show at COSI with 6 cameras, 2 of which are robots, and that's on the air.
They're still controlled by a person.
Still controlled by a person, yeah. You probably won't be able to see it from here, but there's a device in the control room there that looks like a game device for video games, and that's actually the controller for the robot cameras. But still some of the old things persist, like the types of lights that you use are, although they've gone more to LED lights now, and these are still quartz lights, but the amount of light, maybe not quite as much light, but the placement of lights is, and those principles, old principles, television, haven't changed much since the very early days of television, even though the technology has changed quite a bit. This is actually part of the lighting system. This is an older lighting system here. And are you going to take them the back way to radio? Mm-hmm. Okay, as you go to the past what's called the cage, which you can see is a wire fence, you'll see a huge transformer. There are 2 of them. There's a second one behind that. And as someone described it, it's the size of a pickup truck. Actually, I think it's a little bit larger than a pickup truck. And there are 2 of these huge units there. And all they do is supply power and allow us to raise or lower the lighting in the studio here. And what this is this allows us, we have 24 channels here that we can raise or lower the lights with. And these plugs allow us, you'll notice on the green battens, those are called battens up there just as they are in theater, you'll see yellow numbers on them, and with each number there's a little electrical pigtail, and that electrical pigtail corresponds to a number on each one of these lines. So we can take each of these lines and plug them into these 24 faders, okay? And the 2 pickup sized units in the cage then allow us to fade the lights up and down. Now down at COSI we have a similar situation in that we have a board that is about the size of this board here to control the lights, okay? But instead of 2 pickup sized transformers and faders to fade the lights, we have 124 faders, 124 as opposed to 24 here, 124 faders, and they're in a box the size of this cupboard. So there's just another one of those robot cameras inside, and although it looks like it's a plate of glass in front of it, it's what they call half silvered, where where there's someone giving an address, and the audience can look at it and they can look straight through it, and it looks just as though it's clear glass, just as this one does. But if you look at it from the other end, if you have it turned on, which this one is not at the moment, it looks, you can see the prompter, the text scrolling up the monitor.
If you look, you can see against the wall back there are probably the cameras that you've seen in old movies, like the old, large cameras that turn into these really little small things.
You're very welcome.
So this location that we're at here, so when we first came down the staircase that we walked into, that was the old studios I was telling you about. So this location that we're in now, we've been in about 10 years. And this location was part of the hotel and conference center that you see upstairs. These were all conference rooms. The studios that you'll be walking through were all conference rooms. In the tech center, all this stuff, they were just all conference rooms. So we had a complete build out. We had to hire engineers to come in, kind of redesign the structure to get what we needed. And it was interesting, we had to go through a university process to get, since we're affiliated with the university, to get the engineers. And even when we showed them the floor plans, they weren't quite sure why we needed 4 pieces of drywall with a gap in between them. So we had to kind of even bring them up to what we were hoping to accomplish with, sound and isolation and some of the things that we need for studio environments. So as you can see over here, this is a live shot of our radio show. And right now it's called All Sides, but the same kind of incarnation of the show back in the day was called Open Line, and it had Fred Anderley as the host. And over the years we had gotten a few inquiries of like, we really want to do a show, but there wasn't any good way to get those gigantic cameras into our small studio. So as the technology developed and now the cameras are basically, real small and everything can fit in there, we can do a 4-camera shoot inside of a small radio studio, and that's what you're looking at here. And this is now broadcast live all over the state. So if you're listening to All Sides with Ann Fisher, you'll every once in a while hear a call come in from Akron, Cleveland, or coming from the south side. You'll hear, a lot of areas that we would never reach into, people calling into the show because they're watching it on the television as well. Especially in your mind. You don't want to do it too far in advance, and obviously you don't want to cram like the day before, so there's a little bit of kind of both in order to get it all in there. Unfortunately, Ann is on the air now, or I would take you into her studio, whereas we have 1-inch panels in here for the walls. In her studio, we've got 3-inch and 4-inch panels. So when you walk into her room, it just, the whole kind of room collapses on your ears. It sounds really odd, but she's on the air right now, so we won't be able to hear that. But so we really want to control. This is our main Studio A for productions, for interviews, for things that we do on the radio side, and we really want to control kind of what it sounds like. But we also do live bands in here, we do bluegrass in here, we do small chamber groups in here, so we really want to control the audio in here. Yeah, this table rolls out, the legs come off and we roll it out of here, so we get them in here. So we do all that in here. We want to control, the audio, the sound of the studio, but we still want it to be a little bit lively. So this is kind of an intermediary room where you can still hear a little reflection in my voice when I'm talking. But, again, like in Ann's studio where they're doing an interview and there's never going to be any, every once in a while somebody might come in and play an instrument, but really the focus is the discussion, and we don't want anything else hampering that sound, so you can really focus on what's happening there. So that studio, when you talk, your voice comes out and it dies. I mean, it's really an interesting situation, but it makes for a great radio because you're not hearing any of the extraneous stuff that's happening in the studio, and it's not distracting you from the show, so there's a different kind of feel for that. And the studios are built in here with kind of a lot of sound techniques, things to kind of control the sound, things that we want to make sure that we have the control over the sound in the studio. And you'll notice the glass in the windows is angled, so the reflection doesn't come back, so it's a different reflected angle inside of the glass. You'll notice this ceiling is actually foam. You see me kind of poking that, it's soft, so the ceiling is foam. Carpet, you'll notice carpet on the table as well. You'll notice the sound isolation on the walls. And then
the round,
the windscreen, yeah. So you'll notice kind of a double windscreen here. So what that is when someone's talking through the microphone, your P's, your S's, so you get that wind, and if you put your hand in front of your face, you can feel it. So what this does is it just disperses that, spreads it out, so that it doesn't hit the capsule inside of the microphone and pop it. So it disperses it. Now, before they were commercially made, they just used to take pantyhose and stretch it over or something, and they used to make those themselves. So, you know, a little bit nicer, not with like a wooden frame with pantyhose stretched over it. But this is what we use, and as much as we can, we want that on just about every microphone we can. There's some that we don't have it on, depending on what it is. If we're doing live, kind of in-studio music sessions, and we don't want to, because it changes the way that it sounds a little bit as well. I mean, we want a real nice clear sound if we're doing, like, say, a little small chamber group or something like that. So we won't use those if we're doing something like that. But really, it helps to really control the sound and keep it from popping and get that sound on the air that we don't want.
How is it we don't hear chairs squeaking as listeners and such things as that?
Well,
WD-40.
a lot of it is, well, you will hear it, quite frankly. You'll hear some of it. It just depends on what you're listening for. But the way that the studios are set up, a lot of what we're trying to do is control kind of the sound. So, you know, the chairs that we use, we're looking for chairs that don't have squeaks. We're looking for chairs that don't have arms, so that when people push them in, they don't bang on the table. We put these on the table so that people that are, you know, have a tendency to hit the table, it dampens it a little bit. All the microphones are in shock mounts. You can see, so if you bang the table, the microphone is basically floating in a suspension system. And then there's rubber on the bottom of the base as well. So there's a lot of different things to kind of control some of the things that you hear, including, you know, the pattern of the microphone itself. So if you can see on the front here, you can see there's an 8. There's something that looks a little bit like a heart, and then there's a circle. Okay, so those are different kinds of patterns. So one is a Super 8 pattern, cardioid, and then the other is omni. So what we're looking at with a microphone is if we're talking into it, depending on what pattern I want. If someone's across the room from me and they're banging like this, if the microphone is an omni, which means it can hear all the way around the microphone, it'll hear somebody banging across the table on it. So if the microphone is in cardioid, which is what we use mostly, and someone is sitting here at the table, so what happens is the microphone is hot around the edges, dead in the back. So anything that's in the back of the microphone, the capsule, which stands straight up inside of there, will not hear anything on the back. So it's a kind of a digital set pattern inside of the microphone that tells it to ignore the stuff on the back side of the microphone, so you won't hear that. So with the other pattern is the figure 8 pattern. What you'll have is you'll have the microphone hot in the back, the microphone hot in the front, and dead in the sides. So the different patterns of the microphones can also control what we hear in the studio. So the worst thing that we could do would be to put it on omni, which means the microphone hears all over the place for interviews. When we're doing some types of music, we want it in omni because we want to hear everything. We want to set the stage. We want to hear the stuff that's happening on the sides. You know, if we hang a microphone in omni over top of say a chamber group, it's going to get everything that's happening instead of just focusing on one aspect. Now, for different types of groups, we will run the microphones in different patterns because we want to focus on a specific area. So if, you know, the violins, we want to be louder in the mix. If we have a cardioid sitting there and it's facing at them, we can bring them up in the mix more and have a little bit of the dead area around them. If it's omni, if you push the mix up higher on that microphone, it just raises the floor for everything. All right, so this is our main Studio A control room, which controls this room. It's also the main production room that we use for producing on-air things for the stations, both the classical station and the news station. And as I was mentioning, when we were kind of looking at the old side of the building where our old studios were, those were the analog studios. Now we have the ability, instead of only having one basic cable that would send things from studio to studio and take tons of time, everything is now, a central server. Everything once it hits the server, it's available in every single studio immediately. So we have the ability to have the audio on demand instantly as soon as it's recording, and actually while it's recording as well. So if somebody's recording like a 5-minute feature and it needs to get on the air in a minute, while they're recording the back end of it, we can start the front end of it and have it go through all the way the recording process. So huge advantages to some of the technology that is out there currently. And also with the console, so historically in a studio environment, you have a console that's set up with either the microphones or the inputs, the ISDN box, some processing that we have, and everything shows up on the console, and what you have in your studio is what you have available to you. Well, in the new environment, everything in this entire studio complex is now available to me at this console. So instead of one fader just being a direct input that is wired to that input, now I can switch through here, and I can literally, through this digital switcher, I can pull up anything that's in this entire studio environment. So If I want to, I could pull up, this is Christopher Purdy, who is one of our classical announcers. If I wanted to, I could turn his microphone on in here. So you will never have the ability to do that. So the advantages are, if something happens in a studio environment, his studio has an issue, the boards are all computer controlled now, so if the board crashes, I can put him on here and I can have him go in here. If I'm doing a production and my CD player burns out, I can fire up a CD player from another studio down here now. So it really gives you an incredible amount of flexibility to be able to do really anything in the studio environment and bring it back to this console, which until we came over here, we didn't have any of that ability. So if something happened, in your room, you're done. You got to go find another room. I mean, and all the equipment in that room is out of commission. So the good thing is if his console dies there, it doesn't take all the equipment in that room out of commission. We could pull it up in another room, and we could use other studios to go live on the air. So we have also our AM, our news control room. I'm saying AM because that's used to be AM, but we haven't had AM for about 5 years now. So our news studio, if something happens in the main production room, and AM still needs to be on the air, we can then go to our other control room, and we can just push one button, and it'll assign all of the inputs that's in AM studio. It'll take it away from that console, and it'll put it in another console in another room, so we could go live from another room if we need to. So a tremendous amount of flexibility. And this one is a little bit more involved than some of the other smaller ones that are in the studios, because we're doing a few other little things in terms of the mixes that we're doing and some of the audio projects that we're doing in here. So we have a Pro Tools system in here as well, which is a digital audio workstation, so we can mix and do things in there. And then we can also add things live on the fly. So if we're doing a studio session, we could send things to Pro Tools, and then we can have the output of Pro Tools with it sweetened with EQ added or reverb or anything else added, and then we can bring that back up in the mix and bring it right back into the studio and have that be part of the mix that either goes to air or goes to tape. So this is our digital audio workstation that serves kind of three purposes for us. First of all, it's our central server kind of interface, so it lets us get to all the audio and things that we've recorded and saved. And all the stuff is in the tech center, and then again, there's workstations in each studio, so that as soon as it's recorded in any studio, it's available in all studios. So really, it's storage, and right now it's a 5 terabyte system. We're probably at about 2 terabytes. Last time we checked, there were, if I remember correctly, 35,000 different individual pieces of audio in our system. It'll hold 99,999. So got some ways to go, but we keep an eye on it just to make sure, because obviously the more stuff we can keep out of it, the faster it'll work. So that's one part of it, is the storage system. So we have a music library where we can play stuff back. So if they're live on the air, they can announce a piece of music, they can play the next piece of music. So they can use it in a live assist mode, which is kind of the second way it works. So it's our storage, and then it's our live assist mode. So they'll make an announcement, and then they want to play the next piece of music. They can go and they can set it up in a playlist and have all the music ready to go in order, and then it'll play the piece of music, it'll stop, they'll come on the air, they'll do the announcements, they'll play their next piece of music. The third way this works is it's also an automation system, so we can have the computer run the station, both of them at the same time, or any of the studios or anything else that we want the computers to run. So for the classical station, we have somebody on air from 5 a.m. in the morning up until we hit our 6 a.m. in the morning, up until we hit our last shift, which ends at 5. And then there's a couple of pre-recorded shows from our local hosts, and then there's a network that runs. So we program, my department programs, let me refresh this first, the computer that actually physically runs the console while nobody's here. So for instance, 101 is the classical station, and this is the Monday playlist. So this is actually this is the playlist that will be running the station tonight. So you can see we program different commands in here for the computer to run the station. So at 1 a.m., there's an NPR feed with C24 is kind of the network service that we use overnight. So we tell the computer, turn off the network service, fire these 2 breaks, which are local promos for us, and then turn the network service back on. So then we have to go in here and program, hundreds and hundreds of of basically commands for each day. And we have one person whose sole job is, programming commands, and she does a fantastic job. But we have all these commands in here that need to fire in order for the stations to run properly with nobody in the building.
And
So
who
if-
would know that? Is anybody listening, or is the reliability such that?
So we're pretty good at it, if I do say so myself. So I check these. We have another person who checks them, and obviously then the girl that we have that does it as her position, she does a fantastic job. So she's, I would say maybe once a week I might catch something. Whereas before we had hired her, I might be catching 5 or 6 things. So she's doing a fantastic job. I'm catching some stuff, and then we have another guy who checks them as well. Eric will check them as well. So if we're not catching them, which every once in a while it happens, because you kind of get numb to it all as you're looking through. Really, we have this has to happen every day. All of this has to happen every day, and if one little thing is not right, we're off the air. So we have a silent sensor. So what it does is it listens to the audio console, and if it doesn't hear anything coming out of the audio console for a minute, 10 seconds, it calls our phones.
Oh, I see.
Yes. So we're either physically listening, or the call-out system is listening for us, because obviously we can't listen all the time. And they do have a little bit of a larger studio, because every once in a while they have a guest in there. And if it's something like a solo violin or something like that, they can play directly in here. You put coffee in a board and you're done. And we've been done.
Just make sure it's black coffee.
Yes. It's the official studio, so she's live on the air from 10 to 12. And then these are the individual workstations for inside of the studio, so the studio has their own workstation. And then on the end rack down here is the satellite system that we use to ingest our audio program. So there's a web interface where you can go on and you can put in a request for the import of the programs, and then the programs come down as files. So this is our CD library. If you poke your head in here.
What's your acquisition budget like on an annual basis?
For paying for CDs and stuff? We don't pay for them. Yeah, they said. So this is our newsroom area. So all of our reporters and our editors are here. And then there's another, up against the wall down at the end where the clock is, there's another workstation that is just like the digital workstation that you saw in the studios. At their desks, they all have a copy of Adobe Audition, so they can mix their own stories at their desk. Once the stories are done, they can then file those. They can send them back into the studios through the shared network drives. So they can then send them in the studios, pull them from the studios, and put them back in each studio. That's the tour. Anybody have any questions before we get you back upstairs?
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Very much.
Absolutely. All right, we'll get you upstairs here.